Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we've got a top 16 breakdown for the TAC Games Perth Regionals that happened this past weekend. They had over 250 players, 8 rounds of Swiss into a top 16 cut that we see here today. And a couple things before we get started. First, if you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. We make a lot of content for the One Piece card game, and we've got a lot more with EBO2 coming out in the next couple weeks. Also, we do have a lot of content on my website, Eggman Events, which we have tournament data, we've got deck lists, we've got my team deck list, some power rankings too, and just a lot of great resources for anyone trying to get into the One Piece card game. So make sure to check it out if you haven't already, and let's just jump on into it. So starting off, we do have, again, 252 players, and in that top 16, we do have 4 Doflamingo, 3 Shanks, 3 Teach, and then singles of Usopp, Red Purple Luffy, Reiju, Bonney, Lim, and Zoro as well. So a good variety of decks that are super viable right now. Seeing Dofi as the strongest leader into this top 16 is really interesting. As of recording, we did also have the regional in Montreal here in North America that Dofi ended up getting first place, and it was a Dofi versus Dofi finals too, which was interesting to see this deck kind of a bit on the rise as well. So but you know, still a lot of variety. Red Purple Luffy is definitely a deck that I currently don't have a lot of faith of in this format, so to see it get a top 4 finish I think is really remarkable. And again, like, we just have so many different decks that are viable right now, which is really cool for this OP10 format as well. So we're going to go over the top placing list into each one of these, but again, I want to say, like, in the top 8 we have 7 different leaders, with the overlap being 2 copies of Shanks too. So that's just really cool that, you know, we have so much variety in a meta like this one. But we've got, again, 9 different leaders for this one, and let's jump into our first place list, which is Douvelle's version of the Red Shanks here. And you know, Red Shanks I think is kind of like the best deck in the format by default for a lot of people. It's very strong. It doesn't have any like super bad matchups. There's a lot of variety spread. There's a lot of different like choices for deck building too. Generally speaking, like, the top end is pretty understood with Beckman, Silver's Rayleigh, Monkey.D. Dragon, and 10-drop Shanks in most builds. Sometimes you play a single copy of Goldie Roger. This is just kind of a card that, you know, knowing that it exists means your opponent has to play against the game differently, especially when you're in a best of 3 cut. You can just never like go down to 0 life confidently, because you know that this card could just win the game on the spot too. So you know, making sure that this card's just in the deck for in case you do get into a best of 3 scenario does help out a lot. We are playing the build here without any searchers to help our consistency, so no copies of Uta and no copies of Nami, but we are playing 4 copies of Red Hawk. I know a lot of people like to play this card, not necessarily for the counter, because a lot of people kind of are heads up playing around it, but the trigger effect can get so much value in this meta right now, right? Kind of like a get out of free jail card a lot of the time, where, you know, if it's your last life, you can, the fact that this can interact with leaders is insane for this game, right? Giving something minus 10k. And, you know, it's not always your best scenario to go for it, but you know what, if there's no better things to do, or if it's your only win condition, it's your only win condition, and sometimes that happens. So I know, like, some people say this is a 4 of, some people don't play the card at all, and I think that's a good kind of difference between a lot of builds for Shanks is, you know, are you playing searchers of Nami or Uta, or are we playing like Red Hawk, or what's our condition, you know, consistency tools too. So we have all that. And also in the top 8 we've got Gerrard's version of Shanks as well, and you do see like a good amount of overlap. Again, the top end is almost always these cards. We do have additional 10 cost Shanks from OP06 just for getting some more removal. And since we are playing the Uta with the red hair package in this build, it does make sense to run a little bit more of the, you know, 1 extra copy of the 10-drop Shanks to be searched. We are also playing just a good amount of our 2Ks of Pongo and Lime Juice. And, you know, this deck is still, you know, very, very like customizable, and it's really cool to see different people build different ways too. So yeah, I think I just want to show off this one too. Again, top 8 is a fantastic finish for it, and being able to just show, like, you know, Shanks is very variable, you know, variable in the mid game, in early game in this. The late game, you kind of know what they look like, and you just say, okay, this is their best card. I hope they didn't draw it, because if they drew it at this spot, then I'm probably losing. Most of the time, it's like, I hope they didn't get Silvers, because this card just ruins a lot of my game plans and boards and stuff. So again, this is the build from Gerrard, and congratulations for their top 8 with Shanks. Next up, we've got our second place. So this is Fabien's version of the Marshall.D.Teach. I don't have a lot to say about this deck that I haven't said a lot of other times in the last month. The fact that this deck is, like, you know, we have Shanks where there's, like, you know, 3 different builds mostly, right? We have a lot of variety. There's actually more builds of Shanks, by the way. These are just kind of like 3 basic ones, but the fact that, Teach is just like, here are 46 cards that you have to run in this deck. Choose four, if that, and that's kind of where it is, right? There are like some choices on ratios, right? But I will say, like, this is like probably the most standard build of Teach, I think, for this format, right? Which is not an insult in any way. And I'm sure like there have been this exact 50 on my builder earlier in this format too, and it's really hard to credit any of these decks to people because they are just so similar, right? A big 50, we have like four cards that aren't in the main, aren't Blackbeard Pirates, right? They are the Finger Pistol, right? Running four copies of that, and that's it, right? Like everything else is just running like four copies of Stronger, the Lafitte, the Q playing two copies of Vasco Shot, some 2Ks in the Shiryu, the Burgess, the 4-drop Kuzan, and just everything else. So we aren't playing the new Shiryu from OP10. I think that's been a pretty good tool for a lot of people to help you get some removal. But I think Liberation is like a great way, if you're not playing that card, to help you get the board back, right? The fact that you play a 4-drop Shiryu means that you have more cards on board, so it's a little bit tougher to meet this condition at times. But I do think that that's impactful for like a decision point, right? If you're playing against a more aggressive meta, I think that 4-cost Shiryu deserves a spot at a couple copies. But also Doc Q and Von Augur gets a lot of removal in this meta too. And if your opponent doesn't have like a great way to interact with these, you're in a really good spot too. So not much more to say, but congratulations to Fabien for their second place finish with Teach. The next up, we've got Usopp. So this is Thomas's version of the deck, and I think honestly Usopp's been doing a lot better than most people are expecting it to do in this meta. There are a lot of believers, and I'm not saying that no one believed in this deck, but generally speaking, I had some tier lists. I put him in like 1.5-ish for most of it, and I got a lot of comments, people saying, oh, stop believing in Usopp, the deck is not good, stop coping. And it's been mildly consistent, I think, in getting some top cuts around the world in this English version. And even like there's two separate builds, I think, that are pretty viable right now. I would say this is the more standard build of Usopp right now. The fact that we are just running kind of like the new cards that we got in the set, right? It all kind of revolves around Rebecca, the 7-cost from OP10. The fact that it gets to play two bodies, even if out of your hand, is great value. The fact that also this can attack the turn it's played with the Colosseum out is really strong too. Kyros is a broken card in this deck. The fact that it's a 7-drop 9K that gets rid of a 5-cost that then it can attack into something if you need to. I've said this last time I saw the deck too, but I've been seeing more people on yachts being able to use this to give something rush into active cards the turn is played. So there's some scenarios where you can play 7-drop Rebecca, play Kyros and yachts. Kyros gets rid of a 5 or less, and then you can attack 9K into anything on their board if you have Colosseum out as well. So I think that's really good value. That's a lot of disruption. It does take a 2K out of your hand, but I think it's worth it more times than not to just get that body off the board. So other than that, I think Usopp's in a really good spot in this meta. It is a little particular. It is like very consistency based, meaning that, when you are able to find like your Leo and your Colosseum, you usually find all the cards you need to. But since like your perfect curve means that you have just so many cards you need to see, right? If you don't find Colosseum by turn 2, you feel like you're really behind. There are definitely games I've played in this deck where my opponent just doesn't see the card, which means that like it's a different playstyle altogether. And, I do think that there is a lot of variance for something like Usopp, but I also will say that if you are able to survive Swiss and get into best of 3 top cut with Usopp, I think you do have a good chance of 2 of your games being really solid against some opponents too. So I think that's very strong too. So this is Thomas's build of Usopp. Congratulations for their top 4 finish. And to wrap out the top 4, we do have Monkey.D.Luffy from Star Deck 10. This was one of my favorite leaders from the OP09 format. I think there are a lot of great matchups for it. And then weirdly enough, like OP10, I just kind of dropped a lot of faith for it, even though we got a lot of cool new cards and text for this deck in general. And I will say that this build is different from builds I've seen previously, which does give me some hope that maybe there's some viability with the leader in general. So first off, we are running like a good amount of ramp cards, right? We're playing the Zoro as well as the Bond Clay. Bond Clay is always just going to be a relevant card, I think, right? Like until it rotates out in like a year and a half, or like almost 2 years, right? They really can't power creep this card, right? The fact that it ramps a card active, the fact that you're able to attack with it kind of big later in the game. This card's just really, really good, right? So of course you play it in purple Luffy, and then we do have like some new like ramp cards. It's to Die For is like less new, but we do have God Thread. So this is from OP10. KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less, and then you get to ramp a Dawn active too. So there are some scenarios where this helps you, and you can get like a double ramp. I do really like the Rosinante in this deck too. The fact that like later in the game we're able to get rid of our ramp cards that we don't need anymore to draw 2. The fact that we're able to keep 2 Dawn open at the end of the turn too to be able to keep our Gum Gum Giants live is really great. Or even like if we're playing against a green deck, we can easily have like 3 Dawn open. So even if they use Hody, we still get 1 back. So I think that's strong. And then our top end, we don't run Linlin, which is very peculiar to me. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but most people I see are playing that card. Instead, we're deciding to play Monkey.D.Luffy 9-drop or playing Edward Newgate, which I've always felt kind of mid about this card in this deck, but I'm not saying it doesn't get value. It just means that sometimes it's hard for this card to get value if you're already behind. And then 10 cost Shanks, which I do think helps in a lot of matchups. And generally speaking, if you're expecting a lot of Shanks in a meta, which we did see, a lot of Shanks in this top 16 already, Luffy does have like a really good matchup into that deck specifically. So that does help you in a good amount of this format. There are also some pretty rough matchups at the same side. So you do have to kind of balance that. But generally speaking, like this is a really neat leader. I've always had like a soft spot for it. I do think that, this is a tougher meta from what I've seen previously, but there are a lot of great tools for it. And it's really cool to see you get a top 4 finish when it wasn't really on my radar to get a top in this meta either. So again, this is Ethan's version of the build. Congratulations for their top 16 finish with the Monkey.D.Luffy. The next up, we've got Reiju. So breaking into the top 8, we've got Nicholas's version of the deck for this one. And, I've seen a lot of people doing some more testing with Reiju in particular. We did get a new searcher. This is a 1-drop Sanji from OP10. Being able to look top 5 cards of your deck for a Germa card is great when this is such a consistency deck, right? You need to just be able to set up your stage most of the time. You need to be able to find like the 4-drop and the corresponding like bigger card of it, right? So being able to find like if you're able to like consistency say like, oh well, on 3 Dawn I play Porsche to play out 4-drop each G to play out 7-drop each G, you are in a really, really good spot in this meta. I think a lot of decks really can't answer Ichi very great. The fact that you can just put a lot of pressure down, you get a card draw to be able to defend it, and then you can just do the same thing next turn too. So I think that's very strong still. Like that's always been like the thing for Reiju. If they find Porsche Ichi early, there's a lot of decks that really crumble to that pressure a lot of the time. So other than that, we do have a new 2K with Foxy. This is like a mild upgrade for the deck, but it's still just something that we do play from OP10. And then this build in particular, I'm finding more copies of event cards, right? Generally speaking, it's usually like Germa Kingdom and like maybe Red Rock, but we're also playing Germa 66. So we're trying to really be consistent with this, right? Being able to look top 5. It's it's Sanji, but on a field card instead of a body. We also have Black Bug too. So this is from OP6. If the number of Dawn in your field is equal to or less to the number of Dawn placed on your opponent's Dawn, place up to one of your opponent's cost 5 or less characters at the bottom of its owner's deck. So I think there's a lot of impactful 5 costs in this meta right now. I think this has a lot of relevant bodies, specifically against something like Bonney, or where you can get rid of their Cavendish, or there's just a lot of decks where this gets a lot of value too. So in general, I think that's a good pick. It's kind of like a copy of like 3000 Worlds, but a little bit more like the trigger is better, right? And it's a searchable card, so that's the kind of the trade-off for it. But I know a lot of people who are just like forever Reiju fans. I think this is one of the better metas for the deck right now. And congratulations to Nicholas for their finish with Reiju. The next up, we've got Doflamingo. So even though it was like the most popular deck in the top 16, it did just get a top 8 finish. And this is the build here from Gerrard. And, I've been seeing some minor adaptations in the last couple of weeks with Doflamingo. We did have like a big change that we had to do with Jinbei getting removed from this deck. I know some people thought the deck wasn't viable without it, but I think it's still very persistent. There's a lot of matchups where you're very powerful in. I think like 2-drop Teach just kind of carries this deck a lot of the time too. So that is something that's worth playing this deck still, as long as you are able to have access to this card correctly. So that's been very strong. We do have our general lineup of just good 4-drop Warlords of Boa Hancock, the Weevil, as well as the Law. Law is also like a stable card for this, right? Like these two, I think, just put so much value into what Doflamingo does that it's going to be mildly viable as long as these two are just around in the meta at the same time. So other than that, I see a lot of people running more events for this deck too. 2 copies of Raging Tiger and 3 copies of Red Rock. Femur is just like a little bit less common, I think, but you can still play it at 1 or 2 copies if you like it. Josu's really strong in this meta, being able to get a good amount of interaction against a lot of great decks. And then I've been seeing a lot of people play a couple copies of this 7-drop Dofi, right? The fact that this is a 7 Warlords is really good. The fact that you can find it off Sengoku is fantastic. And you just get some really great tempo, right? 7-drop 7k means like in the mirror match too, your opponent has to red rock this card or they can't interact with it, which is great. And I think there's some great matchups where this can get rid of bodies too that your opponent may be not expecting. So other than that, I think Doflamingo's in a good spot in this format. It's been doing very well. Again, it did also win the Montreal format or the Montreal event, which we'll cover later this week too. And I'm happy to look at those decks because from what I've seen, there are some other tech cards too, which is cool to see. Like, even though this is such an ingrained deck, there are different ways to build it, which is really cool. So again, this is Gerrard's build. Congratulations for their top 8. And then to round out the top 8, we do have the build here by Daylen. This is Jewelry Bonney, which at the beginning of this format, I was a lot more optimistic about this deck, right? We did have some great adds to green. We had the Smoker 5 cost, which just helps us get 1 Dawn open for the end of our turn, so we can use this to help get our leader effect and get some more value and just more disruption on our opponent. And then also the 3-drop Tashigi as well, right? If you have a green character other than Tashigi that would be removed from the field by your opponent's effect, you can rest this card instead, right? So the fact that it's a 2k, the fact that it can protect a lot of things, the fact that you can play this off 8-drop Kids effect to be able to help you protect it, all of this is really, really good. I think these are just really good effects. And it's just been kind of tough to see just Bonney's still not very consistent in this meta, right? I think this is, a deck where I think it will kind of come in waves when people aren't expecting Bonney as much. I think this gets a lot of value. And when people are expecting Bonney, it has like some mildly poor matchups. The fact that also, it's a little bit less consistent. A lot of our good cards, we can't really search as much. Cavendish is like still, I think, really good on 5. But I think a lot of people respect 5 costs right now and they try to remove them. So this card, stays on board less often than it normally does. And that really, really hurts. So one adaptation I've been seeing more often, though, kind of in like this later part of OP10, is more people are playing this 8-drop Roronoa from OP04. It is like a really specifically worded card, which meant that it was pretty unflexible on release, a year or like 2.5 years ago, dang. But opponent's turn, if this character is rested, your active character with the base cost of 5 cannot be KO'd by effects, and on play, you may rest this character, play up to 1 green character with a cost of 5 from your hand. So being able to play out a 5 cost is great when we have so many great 5 costs. The fact that it protects your active 5 cost too, which is great too, and it helps you and its base cost as well, which means that even if you're playing against Rob Lucci, if they reduce the cost of it, they still get the protection, which is really strong. So I do think that's a great tool for this meta. The fact that you can play Cav, Carrot, R Smoker, I think is really strong, and that just leans up to some later plays. So lastly, for this build, we don't see any 10-drop Dofi. I think this is a card that most people were on at like 2 to 3 copies, so to not see it in this build, I think is worth mentioning as well. And I do think that's it's an interesting decision to not play that card, but I think Carrot does do a lot of great value in this meta with that too. So last thing is that Hodie's just one of the best finishers in this game right now, so Bonney being able to take advantage of that is great. Also, being a 5-life green deck means that we can more consistently use this card without any we can take the life from this effect early in the game and not feel as bad about it. So not much more to say, but this is the build here from Daylen. And we've got 2 more decks into the top 16. We've got the build of Lim here by Jason. And honestly speaking, this is very similar to the first build of Lim that I've tried in this format, right? With the inclusion of the new cards that we got from OP10 and also the exclusion of Ice Age. And then the expectation that Rob Lucci was less present in this meta. And in general, a lot of people are like, this is the time where maybe we can play the, rush to 9 cost Zoro with Lim, put it on the board, and if it sticks on the board, we win the game, right? Which I think is like a mildly good game plan, right? This is where I did most of my testing, and I just had some times where it just felt very inconsistent to try to do this play, and then late game we just had so many Zoros that could be stuck in our hand that made it difficult for us to defend our board in the first place. So I was like a little bit less optimistic about a build like this when I tested it out previously, but I do think like it is a viable deck that can exist, right? The fact that now that we're in this format and kind of like the later edges for it, where people people are less expecting 9-drop Zoro, you can, I think, get some value by sneaking it back in to try to get some value in this format. And compared to more of the, I would say standard builds right now, where we're just playing, Sakazuki's like the biggest cost card in our deck. This build in particular, we're running more of like the Straw Hat cards, so we can get some value off this law, right? The fact that this law can find most, like how many cards we can find this deck? I think it's like 18 cards, which is great. I think that's a good consistency number. Being able to, find 9-drop Zoro, right? If we were trying to like hard ramp into that, we do need to find that card very consistently. It also has 8 2Ks with Nami and Usohachi that we can find. And then we also have Gamma Knife in this deck, which I've been playing in my more traditional builds with this too, being able to use this to get rid of, we get some really good value trades with Gamma Knife. And the fact that it is searchable off 1-drop law is very appealing. So I do think that's very strong. And we are also playing the 5-cost Luffy as just an additional card to play off our leader, but also searchable off the law too, right? So if you have 2 or more rested characters, rest up to one of your opponent's Dawn cards, our characters the cost of 6 or less. So I think all that's pretty solid for the deck. We also have like 2 more 2Ks we can find with Sanji as well. And then the fact that we are able to play out these blockers that help us find our Zoro, right? Like if we're playing against blue and they have red rock, then we lose. But if they don't, we win, which feels really great. I think a lot of decks against Lim right now will be more expecting the Gravity Blade to be useful to get rid of 2 5 costs instead of being able to, interact with a Zoro with a red rock. So I think that's something that can change. And I don't know, like this deck's always been interesting, right? It's been, I think, pretty viable in this meta. Only one of the top 16, I think, is a little bit low, but I think that I'm so happy to see it represented. And it's going to be interesting to see if we're able to convert it into the EBO2 format too, right? This is a deck that wasn't very viable in Japan at the same time during their OP10 when they had their own, they didn't have this restriction list that we had. We have definitely a green and purple leader viable with EBO2 out. And I'm wondering if Lim is going to be an addition to that as well. So this is the build here. Congratulations to Jason for their finish with Lim. And to wrap it up, we've got Zoro. So this is Marco's version of the deck here. And this is just a deck that I think is good, right? I think at the beginning of this format, Zoro was a deck that, a lot of people were on. The fact that we are in a new format and a lot of people were playing unoptimized decks because it was a new format. Zoro, which is aggressive, very optimized, even like the difference between like a 95% optimized and 100% optimized Zoro is so tiny, right? You can't really go wrong with how aggression works most of the time, right? It's always going to get some pressure, and the animal build's still been very, very consistent in this deck too. So I think this 3-drop chopper has been very strong for the deck in general. This 3-drop chopper is also just really insane, right? I've been playing a lot of different builds where we still use this animal package as an engine, and this like Dawn × 2 effect gets so much value if this chopper is able to survive, which is mildly easy to do because most people, again, are trying to get rid of the other 3-drop chopper here. So because of that, I think we get some good value trades, especially since when we have so many 1-drops on our board with like Dr. Kariha, Nami, even like Makino, being able to say, all right, I attack with my chopper, I give the minus to something, and then afterwards they're able to like trade with a Nami into something. Like I think all that's just very good value in this deck. So we do have some great rush cards too with the Zoro, the 5-cost Luffy from the Star deck, and Dragon, and then just a good amount of removal with the Mulgun. This card is, I think, one of the best removal cards in the game when it comes from like removal power versus cost. The fact that also like it can be like an expensive Gamma Knife if you want to think of it that way. There's just so many different ways that this can interact with boards that this is I think incremental for how we play a lot of these decks too. So not much more to say about Zoro. I think the deck is still very strong, very viable in this format. Probably a little bit less viable right now than when it was at the beginning of the format, but the fact that it still just goes burr sometimes is enough. So there it is. But that's going to be it for this video. Again, if you guys want any of the deck lists, you can find them on my website, Eggman Events. And we're kind of at the end of this format as we get into the EBO2 release in the next couple weeks. But even then, like we still see so many, I think, unique decks and leaders. And this has definitely been my favorite month as like for this card game, I think maybe ever, maybe since the release in OPO1, right? There's so much discovery. I think there's so much different like gameplay styles, a lot of different builds, and I've been having a really, really good time. So this is the TAC Games Perth Regionals. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.
Damn it.